All right, so this is now the De Bello Gallico, Book 6, Chapter 17, in which it talks about the gods that the Gauls are going to be worshipping. So here it says, they worship. This is the verb colo colere, so colo colere, a third conjugation, colui cultus, which of course means to cultivate, as what you would do with a field, but it can also mean to worship or to live. And so here we're going to have it as worship, as in cultivate the divine spirit of the god. So they worship the god Mercury most of all. Maxime, most greatly superlative. And there are very many, another superlative, and I can show you right here that I have it handy, in which, as you can see, maxime is the superlative of magnopere, greatly, magus, more, or more greatly, and then the most greatly, and then plurimusa is, of course, then here in the plural, plurimi, plurimai, plurima, and that's what you see is many, more, and then the most. There are very many, or the most images, statues, of this guy. They say. Pharaoh, ferry to lilat is very often going to mean to say instead of obviously just to carry. And so therefore they say that this guy in the accusative is, and very often in indirect statement in real Latin, you will have to supply your own verb, which in this instance will be the infinitive esse as the verb of the indirect statement, that this guy is the inventor of all skills, all arts, as it were. And again, they judge, or you could actually have, as they say, that this guy, meaning obviously Mercury, is the leader, so again we're applying an essay, Ducus is leader, of the roads and of journeys. And so he has that same characteristics as for the Romans, as he is, of course, the god of travelers. They judge that this guy, Hunk, has, there's our infinitive of the indirect statement, the greatest, another superlative, power, whim, which of course is going to be from vis, that word that means strength, power, force, that he has the greatest power for the purpose of seeking money and for the purpose of merchanting, in other words, conducting business, commerce, if you would like. And after this guy, implied they worship Apollo and Mars and Jupiter and Minerva. A word on Yoim, it has a paradigmatic split, in that the nominative is going to look like this. But then, for the rest of the cases, genitive will be Yois, dative will be Yowi, and accusative Yoim, and so forth and so on. Continuing on in the second part, concerning these, meaning the gods we just listed off, they have almost, fere means almost, the same opinion. Remember, is, id, when you add a dem to it, is going to mean the same, which the remaining races implied have. And what is that opinion? That it is a verb of mental action implication with opinion that introduces the indirect statement with accusative subjects, apollonym, and infinitive verbs. That Apollo repels, gets rid of diseases, that Minerva hands over, tradere, the beginnings, initium is a beginning, so this is the plural, the beginnings of works and of artifices, skills, if you would like, that Jupiter holds the celestial power, the caelestium imperium, that is the power of the sky, and that Mars rules the wars. Now, a word, when we say the power of the sky, this is not genitive, so you should not understand it as of the sky, but more like we would have the adjective caninus, sitting in the nominative, but it means of a dog. And so that's why I would rather say celestial power instead of the power of the sky. I would rather say canine or related to a dog rather than of a dog. Nevertheless, that Mars rules the wars. To this guy, which is in the dative case from Hikai Coke, that then Mars is what it's referring to. To this guy, when they have decided, constituo constituere, to decide, to fight in battle, remember polio is battle, they vow, they promise, you could even. So, to this guy, they vow the things which, ea quae. The things, ea is, of course, accusative plural, from is, ea id. So, they vow the things which they have captured, capio, capere, capi, captus. It is a perfect subjunctive, perfect stem, plus subjunctive ending erim, eris, erit, in war. And they will win to plerumque. Generally, they vow. the things which they have captured in war. And when they have overcome. Now remember, kun can mean when, since, or although. But the two whens are different depending upon whether it's a when indicative, meaning a specific instance, time when, or when subjunctive, general circumstances, not a specific time. This is indicative, you can tell, because perfect stem and indicative ending. Isti, it, imis, istis, erunt, as opposed to the subjunctive, erim, eris, erit, erimis, eritus, rent. See the difference between perfect subjunctive and perfect indicative. So when they have overcome, one, specifically at that specific time, they burn the animals having been captured. And so the peoples that they have conquered, they burn their animals, and they bring the remaining things into one location. So they're going to make a big pile of all the spoils that they have won in the battle and or the war. Continuing on, in many citizenries, and so therefore various different towns and or various different tribes and so forth and so on, it is allowed. Now remember that the impersonal verb, of which licet is one, is going to have as its subject an action. That action can be expressed either by an infinitive, and that's what we have here, an infinitive phrase that goes all the way right here, or it could be a subjunctive, which is what we're going to see in just a moment. So, it is allowed. Now what is the thing that is allowed? It is allowed that two mounds, tumulos, having been constructed, it's a perfect passive participle, just replace the X with a cone, of these things, all the stuff captured in war, be spotted in consecrated places, holy places. Now, this is then the whole of it. What is the thing that is allowed? The act of those mounds being spotted is allowed. In other words, you can see them sometimes. It's in the middle of the town, most likely, like we would put it in the square. And not. Neque means and not. It does not often happen. Now, what is the it? Another impersonal verb, accident. And here what you can see is that whereas that impersonal verb had the whole phrase dominated by an infinitive, here's going to be a whole phrase dominated by a subjunctive in the form of auderet. Now remember, auderet is from audeo, audere, ausasun, a semi-deponent verb that of course means to dare. It is an imperfect subjunctive. So what is the thing that often not does it happen? What is it? Is the act that, with the religion having been neglected, somebody dare either to hide the stuff having been captured with himself, so instead of adding it to that big pile in the middle of town to kind of keep it in his own house for their own self, or to lift, as in shoplift, steal, the stuff having been placed, implied in that town, as it were. And the most serious punishment, gravissimum supplicium, the most serious punishment has been decided for this thing. And what is this thing? And remember, it's a id. This is the dative, e. When it modifies something, it is going to turn to the equivalency of hekakok or leila lud. And the serious, most serious penalty has been decided for this thing with torture. So if you get caught stealing from the pile here in the middle of town, it is going to be torture for you. Continuing on into number 18, chapter 18. So, all the Gauls, they teach, indicate, this is not the verb to say, but they indicate that, and prognatos is a perfect passive participle, add an essay, and here we can make just merely a perfect verb, that they themselves, accusative, have been descended, have been born from, prognatos, from Father Dis. Remember, Dis is another name for Pluto. And they dicunt. Now here's the verb to say. Notice dico dicere, third conjugation, versus dico dicare, first conjugation. And they say that this thing, this idea that they come from dis, proditum, has come forth, or has been come forth, add an essay to it, and all of a sudden we have made yet another one. This is from the verb etus, from the Druids. So where did they get this idea from? From the Druids. So they say that this thing id has been come forth from the Druids. I know that is clunky English, but you understand what is being implied. Ob and causom. And on account of this reason, again, it's it modifying something. They finiant, they end the spaces. Now, spatia is accusative plural. It is from the second declension neuter word spatium, spatii, I should say. They end the spaces of all time, not by the number of days, but of nights. And so whereas we would say, oh, it's going to be the weekend in a couple of days, they would say, oh, it's going to be the weekend in a couple of nights. They think about it in terms of nights, not day. Nevertheless, and they observant, the birthdays, dies natales, and the beginnings of months, genitive, mensis, and of years. They observe the beginnings of those things in such a way, seek, that as a result, here, because seek is our word, that includes the word so in English, then it is the result clause, kind of like your mama jokes, all have the word so and that in it. So is in the seek, and that is the ut, that the day follows the night. And this is subjunctive, because this verb is the deponent verb sequor, sequi, and remember, short ere turns into a long I when it is passive in its form, and all deponent verbs, remember, always look passive. So, we fear a giant lion. If it were an indicative, it would look like the following, say, quitur, with an I. So, follows subjunctively, that the day follows the night. So in the reliquis vitae institutis, in the remaining institutions of life, they differ from the rest, almost differ from the rest, because of this. Because of, from, in, on, and. The reason why I say because of is because the hoc is going to be referring to the part that follows. And what is this thing? So in the remaining institutions of life, they almost differ from the remainers, the other peoples, because of this. Because they do not allow pati or pati, possessum, they do not suffer, they do not endure, they do not allow their own sons, suos liberos, their own children, ad ire, to go to them openly. So in public, they're never seen with their children. Unless, nisi, when they have grown up, adelaverunt, and they do this, an ut clause showing purpose, so that they may be able, make it subjunctive, posint. If it were an indicative, it'd be posunt, from the verb posum, pose, potui, to sustain the service of the military. They don't want to turn them into little mama's boys and daddy boys, and so therefore, they are going to keep them at arm's distance. Nevertheless, so, because they do not allow their own sons to go to them openly, and they say, or they lead, I'm sorry, not say, this is duco ducere, but it is in their mind they lead it. In other words, they believe it. They think it. So, and they lead in their minds, they believe that, and this whole clause that you see here is being reduced to an action. And it is going to function like the accusative subject. Your verb implied will be esse, and then that terpe from the adjective, terpis, terpe, which you can see, that is neuter in the nominative, thus it'll be neuter like that with a fake E in the accusative. Make sure that you are clear about that. We can take a look here at this. You can see it right here. Terpis, terpe, the accusative, and it is functioning as this accusative like the complement predicate adjective. So, let's go back and see what it says as a total. They believe, they think, they lead in their mind that the act of a son in his boyhood age to stand in the sight, conspectu, of his father in public, they think that that action is disgusting, is foul, is ugly. And that is what terpis means. We get the English word turpid from it as well. And so, the oddity of the fact that they will not even be seen in public with their own children. In the next passage, we are obviously going to begin in chapter 19 and learn about what it is like in marriages and husbands and wives.